It's really quite disappointing and kind of a commentary on the state of the sport when a fighter who isn't the champion but is still a top contender, easily top 3, definitely top 5 in the division, probably most likely top 3 in a division, is contemplating retirement simply because they can't make ends meet. That's not the way this organization should be running. That's not the way the sport should be operating. And I think that is a red flag. It's something different needs to be done to make it worthwhile for these people that maybe can't win the title but are still top caliber fighters. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're breaking down the upcoming UFC 193 event, which will take place on November 15th from Melbourne, Australia, and feature not one but 2 women's title fights in the main event. I'll be breaking down all 5 predictions on this episode of the show. All of my preliminary bout breakdowns, and I believe there are 8 preliminary fights for this card, are available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. You can also go and vote in the polls and see who the public's backing in each fight. I'm pretty sure I know who the majority of people will be backing in the main event and the co-main event. Nonetheless, check that out. Make sure you cast your votes. Like us on Facebook. Make sure you do that as well, please. We're trying to grow that social media aspect of my site. Check out the prediction panel. Those guys are doing a fantastic job. And contemplate buying the bet packs. My bet pack last show was absolutely brutal. I lost the first 6 fights of the night. It was just disappointing. And it was kind of a tough one to swallow because I had a couple decisions that I felt I could have won. And then, of course, Kevin Souza almost scoring the knockout before getting submitted. I did finish strong, winning 6 of the final 7 fights. A couple of them were heavy, favorites, so I really don't take too much stock in it. But nonetheless, it was a pretty low point. It wasn't the worst I've ever had, but it certainly wasn't even close to acceptable. Nonetheless, you can buy the bet pack for UFC 193 for $10. Or you can pick up the subscription for the remainder of 2015, which is still 7 fights, or still, including UFC 193, 7 fights between now and the end of 2015. And of course, it keeps going. It's savings. Initially, I was going to say 7 fights for $60, you save $10. But because I had such a bad performance last time out, I'm going to say 7 fights for $55. You'll save $15. I usually don't drop it down that low after we get through the first couple. But nonetheless, 7 fights for $55. It's a pretty good deal. I'm going to rebound. I feel strong about this card. I got some good looks coming into this, good leans. So certainly worth your consideration for purchasing that. And one other thing before I get back, of course, the fighter in my intro I was discussing was Miesha Tate. We've heard all kinds of talk about fighters who just can't make ends meet competing in the sport. Guys who are in the low and mid-tier levels of the of competition. But now you've got Miesha Tate, who is arguably the number 2 fighter in the division, definitely top 3, top 5, Kat Zingano obviously taking her out could have a stake for being ranked higher than her. Nonetheless, the way I look at it is she should be able to make ends meet and do well. She's a she's a marketable fighter and she's a capable fighter, puts on pretty decent shows, and yet she said she was contemplating retirement because she wasn't given the title shot because it was just not worth her while to continue fighting. She's getting paid pennies. That's not right. She should be making big time money. And on an interesting kind of a comparable note, it's too bad that the UFC is afraid of what would happen should they make a 125-pound division, because I think Miesha Tate could very easily be the 125-pound champion, but they're afraid to make that division because they know there'll be a mass exodus of fighters leaving Ronda Rousey's bantamweight division to avoid her and get down to 125 and just leave it an absolute ghost town, which is very unfortunate. I would not be shocked to see if when Ronda walks away from the sport, the UFC immediately opens up that 125-pound division. Nonetheless, we have 5 very exciting fights we need to get to, so let's get to that first prediction. We might be ending with a pair of women's fights, but we are starting with the big boys, the heavyweights, as the 14th-ranked Stefan Skyscraper Struve, 30 wins and 7 losses, takes on the Big Show. Well, it's the Big Show. WWE old school there, sorry. Jared Rosholt, 13 wins and 2 losses. Now, Struve is coming off his first win since 2012 after his career was threatened with the heart ailment, and he's only had 3 fights since late 2012. He's picked up a couple of losses in that span, including his last loss to Alistair Overeem. He's trying to right the ship and get back to where he felt he was before. For Jake Rosholt, you look at his record. He's fought 6 times in the UFC. He is 5-1. He's finally getting a ranked opponent. He did fight Alexei Oleinik earlier, who wasn't ranked when he fought. He's ranked now. Nonetheless, Rosholt is getting a huge opportunity, and as a win here gives him a chance to crack the top 15 and get moving up and get on with his opportunity to become a top-ranked UFC heavyweight. Physically, the heavyweight division is always fun to compare fighters. Stefan Struve, a 7-foot-tall fighter with a 10-inch height advantage, and you have a 9-inch reach advantage over Rosholt. Both guys usually weigh in close to the limit. Struve appears to be really filling out physically, and Struve is 2 years younger than his American counterpart. And keep in mind, Rosholt has never fought anyone as tall as Stefan Struve. Very few people have. If it wasn't Stefan Struve himself, somebody like Semi Schilt, but obviously this is a big thing for big change for Rosholt is used to. Now looking at Rosholt, he is a former NCAA Division I wrestler. 4 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and he's gone to the judges' scorecards 6 times. Both of his losses in his career have come by knockout. Both one to Derek Lewis outside of the UFC and one to the aforementioned Alexei Oleinik. For Struve, BJJ brown belt, black belt in kickboxing, 7 wins by knockout, an impressive 16 wins by submission. He's gone the distance twice. He has been submitted once, and he has 6 losses by knockout. But look at the guys that have pulled off his most recent, created his most recent knockouts: Alistair Overeem, Mark Hunt, Travis Brown, Roy Nelson, and Junior Dos Santos. That is a murderer's row of knockout artists. Now Rosholt, what kind of fighter is he? He's a grinder. He likes to break guys down in the clinch and on the mat with his pressure and his ability just to keep pushing. The Josh Copeland TKO victory he scored was because of his top position pressure and ground and pound. He just broke him down until Copeland could not push back. Still, with Rosholt, though, I'm not sold on his MMA wrestling. 1.76 takedowns at a 40% clip. That's not consistent enough for a fighter that leans so heavily on his ability to take guys down. He scored 3 versus Daniel Omianchuk, but again, Omianchuk's been taken down by just about everyone he's faced. He has scored no more than 2 in any other fight. In his last matchup against Timothy Johnson, he was taken down 3 times compared to only 2 successful completions on his part. He had trouble closing the distance when he fought Walt Harris. And, that's a big question here. How does he close the distance against Stefan Struve without getting tagged? When he can't take guys down, he relies on his clinch fighting, forcing his opponents to carry his weight, land short strikes inside. A nice solid uppercut eventually could lead to a takedown. He will brawl, swing wildly. He'll throw strikes at range and slowly work his way into a closer position. He does leave his chin up. As I said, he's been knocked out twice. He was also hurt by Timothy Johnson and nearly got knocked out in that matchup. With Stefan Struve, he wants to fight long. Uses kicks, jab to keep Rosholt on the outside. Use Rosholt's forward pressure and aggressive style to add to the impact of Struve's strikes when he counters. When against Big Nog, he was routinely landing a big hard right. He threw some exceptional low kicks, which can take the base of a wrestler away. Obviously, his height gives him the ability to go upstairs with a good head kick, and he has a nice front kick to the face, which can be devastating if timed properly. There are times, though, that Struve does not use his reach well. Nogueira was clinching with him at will. He lets his opponents close the gap. But at the same time, we saw Overeem had a ton of trouble closing that distance, partially because he was afraid of getting clipped. But it seemed like he was really at odds. And I wonder, is Rosholt going to have similar issues? As far as takedown defense for Struve, 68% so far in the UFC. He's never been taken down more than once in the fight. He's very crafty on his back, will threaten with submissions, can sweep, keep his opponent from getting comfortable, and I expect to see that if Rosholt does take him down. Now, Rosholt needs to be aggressive. He needs to close that gap, brawl. Punching up could take some steam off his punches. He needs to get on top, and that is the essential aspect of his success here, is get on top, control the position, go from there. Struve should be more comfortable, considering this is the shortest layoff he's had in a number of fights. He's also continuing his training at Black Zillions with Henry Hoof, who's an exceptional striking coach, and that should help him to continue to improve that aspect of his game. Struve's a better striker. He's a better grappler, not a wrestler. I give that to Rosholt, obviously. He's bigger, he's younger. And I think Struve's knockouts, they've come against guys who are true KO artists, not exactly what Rosholt brings to the table, even though he could crack them. Rosholt, I think he gets desperate to try and close the distance. He gets countered on his way in. And my prediction, Stefan Struve to defeat Jared Rosholt by knockout. Our next contest is a very intriguing fight in the middleweight divisions. The 10th ranked, newly minted 10th ranked Uriah Primetime Hall, 13 wins and 5 losses, steps up on short notice to battle New Zealand's own 14th ranked Robert Whittaker, who currently carries a record of 14 wins and 4 losses. As I said, the original fight here was set up to be Robert Whittaker versus Michael Bisping. Hall has stepped up in just over 1 month's notice or chance to prepare, with Bisping having to pull out due to a minor injury. It's just a 2-month turnaround since his last fight, which happens to be the biggest win of his career. He came in and knocked out Gegard Mousasi, and a lot of people claim it was a fluke, and the fact is it doesn't matter because he got the win, and Mousasi's chin was absolute granite, and Hall blew it up. Keep in mind, in that fight, he also took that fight on short notice. Big question is Hall finally living up to his potential, or was it a lucky shot? This fight could go a long way to determining that. Looking at Whittaker first, he's 2-0 since moving up to middleweight, which we've seen a lot of that guys having success going up, more success going up a division than actually going down. But he's 2-0 at 185 pounds, scoring a TKO victory over Clint Hester, and then KOing Brad Tavares as well in his last matchup. Compared to, he had 1 knockout in 5 appearances in the UFC as a welterweight. Physically, same height, 6-inch reach advantage for Uriah Hall, who's a very long fighter. Whittaker is 6 years younger. Looking at at Whittaker first, he's a black belt in karate, BJJ purple belt. He has 7 wins by knockout, 5 wins by submission. His last one coming in 2011, though, so he's really not prone to tap guys out. 2-2 in going the distance, which is a little bit surprising. In his losses, he has 1 loss by knockout and 1 loss by submission. That 1 loss by knockout coming against Stephen Thompson, which we will talk about momentarily. As far as Hall is concerned, he's a 2nd-degree black belt in karate. He has 8 wins by knockout, 2 submission wins as well. He is 2-4 when going the distance, and he has 1 loss by knockout, a TKO against the current middleweight champion, Chris Weidman, which happened outside of the UFC before both guys were known to be who they are in the UFC. Now, both of these guys primarily are striking-based fighters. Whittaker, 4.83 strikes landed per minute versus Hall, who averages 3.21 strikes per minute. But Hall does get hit almost 2 strikes less per minute than Whittaker does. So basically, offensive output favors Whittaker, defensive striking favors Hall. Whittaker throws an exceptionally nice jab. Low kicks, which are something he will mix in as well, can be strong. He's a power left hook. Watch for that. He hurt Brad Tavares with it twice, and I think Kenny Florian was talking about that, and it was just, he talked about it, and then bam, it connected. And against Clint Hester, he dropped him twice with a nice straight right. Twice, maybe once. Maybe I got my notes wrong there. Either way, now looking at Whittaker, when he fought a karate-based fighter in Stephen Thompson, I'm not saying Hall and Thompson are exactly the same, but at least there are some similarities. He had a lot of trouble finding his range. Every time he attacked, he was coming up short and then getting countered, so it was really an all-and-nothing scenario. He was absolutely getting nothing offensively, and then when he was coming forward, he was getting tagged, getting absolutely, eventually got knocked out, or he was hurt with the right hand in that fight and eventually finished. When you look at Uriah Hall, I expect his significant reach advantage and his kicking variety along with his speed is going to create a lot of issues for Robert Whittaker when Whittaker's trying to close that gap and attack, very similar to the Wonderboy Thompson fight. And for Hall, we all know about his striking capabilities, his striking pedigree. He has a nice variety of strikes. He does at times tend to throw too many single strikes, and he does favor flash over functionality. He likes to throw those big, high, quality, or not high quality strikes, just high excitement strikes that aren't always the best option. But we did see against Moontasri, we did see against Adam Sella on the show, when they do connect, they are exciting and they are noteworthy. He does tend to maybe freeze up a little bit, or it's him looking for the perfect shot too often, doesn't pull the trigger, and he allows simpler strikers or less capable strikers to outwork him and get the better of him. Keep in mind, too, when he lost to Rafael Natal and John Howard and Kelvin Gastelum, they all offered takedown threats. Even Moontasri was able to take him down. It was a major threat, and that was creating hesitation on Hall's part. That's not the issue with Robert Whittaker so far. He's averaged 0.66 takedowns per fight in the UFC, so unless he comes out and tries to throw that wrinkle at Hall, I think Hall's going to be very, very comfortable on his feet. How does Whittaker win this fight? Well, he can outwork Hall, but he has to be wary of getting tagged when he does come forward. He was getting lit up, as I said, by Stephen Thompson every time he came in, and he was getting hit and not really making his attempts worthwhile. That's not a good strategy. Has Uriah Hall finally reached his potential, and he's showing it? Quite possibly. This is a short notice fight in a different time zone. Could that affect Hall? It could affect his performance. I'm not thinking so, though. Hall avoids Whittaker coming forward, times him, and eventually lands some big counter. And my prediction is Uriah Hall to defeat Robert Whittaker by knockout. We are at the midway mark of the main card, and we are in the heavyweight divisions. The 8th-ranked Mark the Super Samoan Hunt, 10 wins, 9 losses, and 1 draw, takes on the 11th-ranked Antonio Bigfoot Silva with 9 wins, 7 losses, and 1 no contest. And this is a rematch. The first fight took place all the way back in December 2013, was ultimately a draw. No contest for Bigfoot after he failed his drug test, but it goes down for a draw. Mark Hunt, and considered by a lot of people as one of the best heavyweight fights of all time. Since that matchup, Mark Hunt has gone 1-2 with a KO victory over Roy Nelson, followed by a TKO loss versus Fabricio Verdum for the interim title, and then losing most recently to Stipe Miocic, also by TKO. Bigfoot, same record, 1 win, 2 losses. Flip the script, though, he had back-to-back knockout losses against Frank Mir and Andrei Arlovsky, and then he's coming off a TKO victory over Soa Paleli that ultimately retired Soa. Physically, as we get in the heavyweight division all the time, Bigfoot 6 inches taller than Hunt. He'll have an 8-inch reach advantage. He's also 5 years younger than the Super Samoan. Now, in the first fight, we'll give you a little breakdown of the things that happened. Bigfoot dropped Hunt in the opening round, which probably caught a lot of people off guard. Now, Hunt was using his lower stature and underhooks to defend off any takedowns by Bigfoot as he attempted to take it down, because that is his perceived weakness. It was very good on Mark Hunt's part to be able to do that. Silva had a ton of success with his low kicks. They were doing damage to the lead leg of Mark Hunt, and that was something I expect to see him do more of, especially here. Body kicks and side kicks were also an option, and they were finding their mark whenever he threw them. We did see Mark Hunt finally time and catch a kick for a takedown, mixed up his attack, which again caught Mark Hunt off guard, caught everyone off guard when he got on top. In the third round, Hunt landed a beautiful straight right down the pipe and dropped Silva, put him on his back, and possibly was very close to finishing that fight. When they did get close inside, Silva had a lot of success landing knees. He was pulling Mark Hunt's head down into his knee, which making his lower stature work against him in that scenario. Both guys were exchanging. Both guys were moving forward. We did see at one point Silva mounted Hunt in round 4. He did a lot of damage, but couldn't get him out of there. Hunt was coming forward with some beautiful 1-2s, landing a barrage of hooks. He has that beauty leaping left hook, which I expect to see do a lot of damage with. He has a nice step-in elbow as well. He is also looking for the right hook, starting to set it up with a 1-2, which, again, it can do damage and put Bigfoot down. When you look at the final totals, Mark Hunt outlanded Bigfoot slightly, 103 significant strikes to 97. He also scored two takedowns. Silva went 0 for 4 in that category, and both men were credited with 1 knockdown. Now, fast forward to today. We now have the Bigfoot situation with the TRT. He's post-TRT. He got, a lot of people said he was slower. He's just simply not the same fighter. His body has really aged quickly. He got knocked out twice. He looked, as I said, slow, plodding. Even the Soa Palele fight, he was struggling in the opening round, lost the opening round. Soa, not known for being a fighter, does very well outside of the opening frame, gassed, and Bigfoot put him away. We're looking at Mark Hunt. He's coming off that impressive knockout of Roy Nelson. He was holding his own against Fabricio Verdum, really having a lot of success landing strikes against Verdum before he got cracked with that jumping knee in the second round and put away. And we saw Stipe Miocic really to exploit that weakness of Mark Hunt, using his wrestling on the ground to wear him out and eventually put him away. What does Bigfoot have left? To put things in context, with his last win that ultimately saved his career and kept him from being, on a 3-fight losing streak, he took on a grappler who wasn't a good who's not an overall good striker, not very quick, he's plodding himself and had a bad gas tank, and he capitalized on that. So I don't put a lot of stock into that victory, as this is a rejuvenated Bigfoot Silva, but the UFC certainly taking advantage of the win. For Hunt, his chin and durability is a big issue as well. We've seen it, he was known for his ability to take damage. Is it catching up with him now that he's been stopped a couple of times and busted up and beaten up pretty bad? Ultimately, in this fight, what I look for, I expect to see Hunt's hand speed being the difference. We saw that with Frank Mir. We saw that with Andrei Arlovski. They landed similar 1-2s to what Mark Hunt throws, and it put Bigfoot Silva down because he just couldn't keep up. He couldn't defend, and eventually it found his chin, which is, unfortunately for Bigfoot, an exceptionally large target. For Silva, if he's going to be successful, he needs to use those low kicks. Hurt Mark Hunt, take away his base, take away his ability to explode and jump into those punches. I think Mark Hunt's going to do his damage. We have seen time and time again in fights that at one point had an epic first bout that usually goes the distance or goes deep. More often than not, the second fight will be much quicker, and I anticipate that here. I think Mark Hunt's going to land one of those 1-2s, maybe a leaping left hook. Either way, he's going to crack Bigfoot Silva, and he will finish the job here. And my prediction is Mark Hunt to defeat Antonio Bigfoot Silva by knockout. Moving now to the co-main event of the evening, we are in the UFC's women's strawweight division as the champion, undefeated Joanna Jedrzejczyk. Again, a lot of people say their names differently. I'm going to go with that pronunciation. She's fighting out of Poland, and I said she's undefeated with a 10-0 record. Takes on the 9th-ranked Valerie Letourneau with a record of 8 wins and 3 losses. She comes from my home country, Canada. Now, we're looking first at the odds here. The odds in favor of the champion are more lopsided than the Ronda Rousey fight, which is incredible. In fact, they're being touted some of the biggest spread between favorite and underdog in the UFC. So this would obviously be, by those numbers, the biggest upset ever. I still think Matt Serra taking out George St. Pierre is the biggest upset ever. Nonetheless, this would rank right up there should Valerie Letourneau pull it off, and she just might. Let's take a look at it. Letourneau, she's getting a shot because Claudia Gadelha, who's obviously the number 1 contender, is injured. Also, because Carla Esparza and Penne just got absolutely decimated when they stepped in there with the champion, so they're in no position to get back and get a shot at the title. Rose Namajunas, she's already had a shot at the title, different champion, so they're trying to build her back up. And the UFC is not willing to risk Paige Van Zandt getting in there and getting her hype train derailed or getting her taken out and, losing that momentum and popularity. Keep in mind, TJ Dillashaw was in a very similar situation, getting a shot at the title against Renan Barão, and no one believed he deserved it because circumstances provided him with the opportunity, and we've seen what he did and has done since that opportunity. Now, at UFC 186, this puts things in perspective. Valerie Letourneau fought in the second fight of the night on the Fight Pass prelims against an opponent who is now 1-5 in MMA. And now she's fighting for the title. She just had a big win since that, but nonetheless, that gives you perspective how quickly how quickly she's been given this opportunity. But she has fought quality opposition. Keep in mind, she had a split decision with the aforementioned Gadelha in 2012 when they fought at 130-pound catchweight. She also had a split decision against Alexis Davis. Congratulations on the pregnancy. And against a TKO loss against Sarah Kaufman, both earlier in her career. Nonetheless, it's quality opposition. When you look at Joanna Champion, she has had an impressive run. Pre-UFC, she knocked out Rosie Sexton, who is a pioneer of women's MMA and very tough. She beats Lima in her first UFC fight. Split decision, kind of questionable against Claudia Gadelha. Nonetheless, she got it. Destroys Jessica Penne, destroys Carla Esparza to win the title out, and then Penne, obviously, in her first defense. She basically took on an entire Ultimate Fighter season, big 16-fighter tournament, and made it irrelevant, which I thought was kind of entertaining. Physically, though, let's break these two down. 1-inch height advantage, 3-inch reach advantage for the challenger. The champion is 3 years younger. Letourneau, this is her third fight at 115 pounds, so she should be capable and feeling very comfortable with making the weight cut because she formerly fought as a bantamweight. Now looking at Jedrzejczyk, 4 wins by knockout, including the 2 girls we've already talked about. 1 submission win, and she's 5-0 on the scorecards. For Letourneau, she's 4-1 in fights, ending by knockout, losing that one time to Sarah Kaufman. Submission, she's 1-0, and she's gone the distance 5 times, winning 3 of them. She's a BJ purple belt, so keep that in mind as well. Now, looking at Joanna, she's a lethal Muay Thai striker, world champion, averaging 4.9 strikes per minute in the UFC versus 1.38 strikes absorbed. That's a big difference in what she's dishing out versus what she is taking. When she fought Carla Esparza, Esparza landed 4 significant strikes. When she fought Jessica Penne, she outlanded Penne 126-25. Those are 2 girls who were ranked at the top of the tournament when they were crowning the first champion, and Jedrzejczyk made them look silly. Big question is she's incredibly confident. Is she overconfident? That's a big question. We saw that Renan Barão was overconfident and it cost him. Nonetheless, Jedrzejczyk, she has every reason to be confident. She's been exceptional since becoming the champion. She has very quick hands. Her combinations are slick and lethal. She changes levels very well. She's very fluid, and she moves out of range to avoid taking damage, as we talked about with her strikes absorbed per minute. She will throw an overhand right like Chuck Liddell, which is one of her few striking things I don't like. It could be countered with a takedown or, maybe a counter strike. It leaves her open. She did hurt Penne with a short right hand when she shortened it up a little bit and maybe threw it a little more correctly. Brutal elbows moving forward. Her head kick off a clinch, which she landed against Penne, was darn impressive. And she can throw a front kick to the body or the face, which can catch an opponent coming forward, turn the momentum against them, and hurt them. She's lethal when she can get her opponent's back pinned on the cage, and I expect to see that here. And every time Penne tried to take her down, she shut her takedown attempts down, and the one time she did get taken down, she was up very quickly. For Letourneau, she has good inside leg kicks, a hard body kick, which she should employ here as much as possible, elbows at range, which can be very effective, a nice counter uppercut. When she fought Morose in her last fight, she hurt her with a right hook, which she set up with the body kick just beforehand. She can certainly hold her own in the striking, but in that fight, she was struggling with the speed of Morose. She was fighting a little bit flat-footed, which allows her to generate more power, but it makes her easier to hit. She was trying to slip punches, and I don't know if that'll work. I don't think that'll work here against the champion because she is so effective. She's eventually going to connect. Morose actually hurt her with the right hand, and that's something that, if that happens here, she's going to be in big trouble. If the fight does hit the ground, Letourneau can work top position. She has some decent grappling credentials, but nothing like the past girls who have tried to take Joanna down and keep her down and beat her in that method. Letourneau gets hit way too much for my money. We saw a lot of facial damage build up against Elizabeth Phillips. She was rocked in, I don't know that fight, but definitely the Morose fight. I think Jedrzejczyk is too quick, too diverse, too aggressive. The damage will mount quickly, and my prediction is Joanna Jedrzejczyk to defeat Valerie Letourneau by knockout and retain her women's strawweight title. We move now to the main event of the evening in the women's bantamweight division is the champion, undefeated, world-renowned Rowdy Ronda Rousey, 12-0, takes on the Preacher's Daughter, 7th-ranked Holly Holm, with a current record of 9-0. She's also undefeated coming into this matchup. Now, let's look at some of the particulars. Rousey has a massive hype train. It is rolling and chugging along and picking up steam. It's getting faster and bigger. It's well-deserved. She's been dominant, and she has the personality to make her a star, and people are absolutely eating it up. It's not been a distraction yet, as far as we know. She's not suffering from that Rocky syndrome where we saw him as the champion doing all kinds of things and not really focusing on his preparation, and it ultimately cost him against Mr. T, because Mr. T pity the fool. Nonetheless, for Holm, she's a well-decorated boxer. She went 33-2-3 as a boxer. Very impressive record. Multi-time, multi-divisional, multi-organizational champion, if that makes sense. She won a lot of titles as a boxer. But her only loss, she's had 2 losses. One came back in 2004, and one came in 2011, which she won the rematch in her very next outing. So she's very capable. She's very accomplished. So far in the UFC, she's 2-0, 9-0 overall. She has 2 decent wins over Raquel Pennington and Marianne Renaud, 2 very tough ladies who gave her a good fight. But this is a massive step up in competition. She was eyeing Sarah Kaufman, which is a fight when I heard. I'm like, yes, that's perfect. Let that fight happen. But it didn't. That would have been a good next test. But when you get the opportunity to fight the title, you take it. Hatsu Aoki did not take his shot when he was given an opportunity to fight Jose Aldo, and we all know how that played out for Aoki. Now, looking at Ronda, she's been an absolute wrecking ball. She's beat the number 1 ranked fighter twice, the number 2 ranked fighter, the number 4 ranked fighter, the number 6 ranked fighter, the number 8 ranked fighter, the number 10 ranked fighter. And she also beat Alexis Davis, who's no longer ranked because of the aforementioned pregnancy. She has destroyed them, and not just beat them, she's done it definitively. Her last 4 fights have totaled a grand time of 2 minutes and 10 seconds. For those of you mathematologists out there, that's 130 seconds is how long it's taken her to beat 4 title challengers. Adding in her wins over Miesha Tate, who went 3 rounds with her, impressively, and Liz Carmouche, who was her debut fight, which she had a little trouble, she's had a grand total of 17 minutes and 50 seconds of total octagon time over those 6 fights. Holly Holm has fought for 30 minutes over her 2 UFC fights, so Holm actually has has clocked more octagon time. It doesn't always equate, but that's frightening to consider how dominant Ronda Rousey has been. Physically, Holm 1 inch taller, 1 inch reach advantage. She's also 6 years older. We're well aware of what Ronda is capable of doing. So let's look at the challenger first. For Holm, 6 wins by knockout, 3 wins by decision, 0 first round finishes. That's interesting. All of her stoppages have come in the 2nd and 3rd round. She also has won in the 5th round of, I think it was a Legacy FC title fight. It's interesting to note that most of her knockouts are kick-related. She has a TKO due to leg kicks very early in her career, 2 body kick knockouts, and 2 head kick knockouts. She has an exceptionally good kicking game. We've seen that so far in the UFC. It's arguably better than her hands, which is kind of shocking, or at least it's showcased more, and it carries better in MMA than her hands do. She throws a nice push kick to create distance. She'll also throw that oblique kick. It seems almost like they're used more to maintain separation than to really do damage, and that's something I'd like to see her be more aggressive and willing to try and hurt her opponent, not just keep them back with these techniques. So far, 3.63 strikes landed per minute for Holm compared to 2.2 absorbed. Now, Pennington was not having any success moving forward and attacking. Every time Pennington would attack, Holm was not there. She had great distance management, and then she would engage and attack. But when Pennington started to really come forward and really be aggressive and not wait, that's when she had some success, and that's something to keep in mind here. One thing with Holly Holm is that it was a split decision, even though I thought she clearly won it. She may suffer from some of that Lyoto Machida-style scoring issues, where she's outlanding her opponent, but because she's backing up and being defensive at times, it gives her opposition the appearance of being aggressive and controlling the action. Will that be an issue here? I don't know. Ronda Rousey is not the type of person who usually leaves things up to the judges. Holm is, as far as whether Ronda Rousey can take her down or not, Holm is very strong. She showed good takedown defense. Pennington 5 for 5 on her attempt, or 5 for 5 stuffing Pennington's attempts. She has strong balance, punishes her opponents on their, when they're looking to put her on the mat. But Ronda Rousey's judo is an entirely different animal than anything Holly Holm has faced before. Now, keep in mind here as well, Ronda has improved her striking. If grappling is something she's not going to focus on here, she's improved her striking. She has closed the window significantly of fighters who look to exploit that aspect of her game. Is she as good as they claim? I don't know. This fight could go a long way to proving that. I've said that a couple times in the show. If she does knock out Holmes, the MMA world is going to explode. And that will simply add to her aura, knocking out a former boxing world champion, and it's just going to make the boxing people go insane the way the UFC will promote that fact. Ronda's core strength, though, when they do tie up, is unbelievable, and her ability to throw fighters is unreal, and they aren't prepared to defend it or deal with it. We saw her do suicide throws against Tate, where she kind of gave up her position and body to ultimately get in a better position. We could see something like that here to catch Holly Holm off guard if Holly Holm's able to defend the initial attacks. We did see it almost cost her against Liz Carmouche, who got to a better position and not locked up the rear naked choke that had everybody in the UFC going, oh my goodness, this is not about to happen here in our first fight. We're going to lose the champion we're trying to build around. Holm comes from a very good camp, and she has been training MMA for a lot longer than she's actually been fighting it. The question is she ready for this matchup? If she's going to win or have success of any nature, she needs to maintain distance, use her long-range weapons exceptionally well, and her footwork to avoid clinch positions. She needs to hurt Ronda at some point. She can't just pitter-patter away. She has to hurt her. Counter her coming forward. Try to drag her into deep waters. Because other than the Miesha Tate 3-rounder, we have not seen how Ronda fares in a dogfight, in a fight that goes deep into matchups. Keep in mind, in their careers, Holm has fought 25 total rounds. Ronda's only fought 14, so that could be an advantage for Holm if she can get it into rounds 4 and 5. But again, that's easier said than done against Ronda Rousey. This is a massive step up in competition for the challenger. We're well aware of that. Potentially too much too soon with the fact that she hasn't really faced anyone, but she's still a combat sports champion. Keep that in mind. I think Ronda's aggression is going to overcome the calculated striking approach of Holly Holm. She will close that distance eventually, get her hands on her, and put her in a situation where her boxing and her kickboxing simply does not matter. And my prediction is for Ronda Rousey to retain her bantamweight title, and I think she's going to do it by submission. I really kind of turned into a chatty Cathy there. These were some fights that a lot of people were pretty certain what's going to happen, and I just talked nonstop. Either way, they were fun fights to talk about, and it'll be interesting to see if either one of these, the underdogs, can pull off the massive upset. Obviously, at these odds, I won't be promoting either Ronda Rousey or Joanna champion as viable betting options, but you'll have to tune into the bet pack to see what I do suggest. Nonetheless, all of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. So will the bet packs, so will the end of the year subscription. A myriad of other things, including the prediction panel. Those guys are fantastic. They kicked my ass at the last show. They all did exceptionally well. I went 6-7. Those guys were, I think some were 10-3, 9-4. Check those guys out. They know what they're talking about more so than I do at times, and that's concerning for me. I am approaching 2,000 fights predicted, which is a milestone for me, and I also just correctly predicted my 1,200th fight. I'm actually 1,202 wins. So yeah, whatever that means, I don't know. Nonetheless, like my Facebook page. Enjoy my video, whatever you want to do with it. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. And we have a shitstorm of fights coming up to finish 2015, so buckle up, baby. Talk to you soon.